You are about to journey against the current of contemporary thought and beyond the troubled waters of daily news to the very source of our extraordinary culture. You are going upstream with Cashill and Edge.
Okay, world, here we are back again, episode 21 of Upstream with Cashill and Edge, broadcasting live. No, well, not live, but
from Real Media Studios.
From Real Media Studios in Overland Park, best production facility in Greater Kansas City. So
it's a great place.
Yeah, you're officing here now too, which is kind of cool. You know,
I'm hanging out here all the time. I love it.
I had an odd experience last week. I got to tell you about this.
Do tell.
By the way, if you're looking for episode 20, this is 21. Episode 20 is kind of lost in space right now. We'll try to retrieve it one day, but there's a story there. And
I think I accidentally told the truth on that.
You did. And that is a taboo now. You know, it's a revolutionary act, says George Orwell.
You mean it's not okay to tell the truth in America?
Well, you can tell it accidentally, but you cannot tell it routinely.
Boy, I hope they keep that episode 20 away from us for our own good.
For our own good, because
I sure don't want to see that. I don't want to learn anything.
I don't even want to talk about it, because if we talk about it, there'll be no episode 21. So
you mean they'll come in and
no, I don't even want to talk about it, because
right.
you know, I had to look over our shoulders. But here's what happened last week, right? Mm-hmm. This is like totally weird. I didn't mean to do this at all. I watched Trump's speech after his indictment in New York, whatever day that was. And then I said, I'm going to watch something to clear my palate, my mental palate, you know. I didn't want to...
A little sorbet.
Yeah. So I went to Netflix to watch this one series I've been watching called The Night Agent, which is it's just halfway good. Improbable, but, you know, some ways reassuring. Except my Netflix wasn't working, right? So I said, well, I need something else to watch. So I go to Fox Nation, and I see that they're showing The Passion of Jesus Christ, right?
A perfect entremet.
And I said, I haven't seen this in a while. It's Holy Week, you know. I'll watch The Passion. This is the Mel Gibson movie of about, 10 or 15 years ago, which was very well done, and it holds
cool.
up.
What's it about?
It's about... there's a real parallel here. I'm watching it. I wasn't even thinking of parallels.
Okay.
And God, I am not equating you or your son to Donald Trump. I've read the Gospels a couple times. I can remember no reference to Stormy Daniels or anything like that. Donald Trump is no Messiah.
They took that one out. Some of the Protestant sects took that one out.
Right. The Stormy Daniels thing. They didn't want that in there.
Yeah, they didn't want it. It's in there. Enoch or something.
Yeah, right. Or Lot and Sodom, you know.
Yeah.
But what intrigued me right away was not that that Trump is a Christ-like figure, but that the paradigm for what's happening today is very much like what happened to Jesus. I wasn't even thinking about this, but here they are shuffling him from one authority to another. Someone want to get him, right? Mm-hmm. But, you know, Herod doesn't have anything on him. The Romans don't have anything on him.
How do you help but draw that?
Yeah, right.
I mean, this is really, they're setting him up for classic martyrdom.
Exactly.
You are dedicated to a higher goal that you've articulated your ideals. They're against it.
Right.
They try to get you for something else, and you go down with the white hat, high horse, and halo.
There you go.
And you are the martyr, and everything's different from then on.
And also the other thing, the other parallel was that, you know, I saw the Sadducees and the Pharisees. They were kind of like the deep state, the permanent bureaucracy in Jerusalem. They're not necessarily evil, but behind them, and they have these crowd
priests,
scenes.
slacks.
Yeah, behind them is the mob, the crowd.
Uh-huh.
Right? They didn't have Twitter in the 29 AD, but they did have the mob, the media. I mean, and they're being roused, and the pressure the mob is putting on the permanent bureaucracy is sufficient for inertia to move, to take over and and move forward with the momentum to, get this guy, because he's the leader of the people, right? He's the people's guy. And the people are a threat to all authorities, and as they've always have been. Now, I'm going to jump forward 2,000 years, or 1,900 and something years.
Man, that went fast.
It did. And because nothing happened. There were dark ages, blah, blah, blah.
You just went from all the way back when they had only Facebook
Right.
to now.
Exactly. It's about two millennia, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But in the American experiment, we had largely, not perfectly, but gotten away with that from that paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
That is, although Nancy Pelosi thinks otherwise, you're innocent until presumed guilty. And we had to set up a whole judicial structure to assure that. Now, when the Soviets took power just about a century ago, a little more than a century ago in Russia, they turned that on its head, and they began to, in the Comintern, which was the Soviet outreach arm, began to look for cases, especially in the United States, because what they had to do was they knew they weren't going to start a revolution here. Stalin wasn't that stupid. But what they wanted to do was defame the United States so that its reputation in the world was not the Statue of Liberty, give us your poor and your welcome and your masses, but as a racist, xenophobic, bigoted hotspot of, anti-everything. And so they looked for cases where they would find someone who was transparently guilty, and they would build up a worldwide movement proclaiming their innocence. So the case they actually literally chose first was the case of Sacco and Vanzetti, who were two Italian anarchists in Massachusetts. In 1920, they rob a payroll station, kill an Italian-American payroll clerk, probably to finance their other activities, and are caught, and they're tried. And the jury doesn't even know they're anarchists. They're just being tried for murder. They get a fair trial. The ACLU goes up to investigate, and the ACLU guy says, when asked about the case, does it have, can we exploit this? He says, it's just a couple wops in a jam. That's his quote. And they leave it. But then the Soviet Comintern catches on that this has international potential. So what they do is they start a worldwide campaign to proclaim the innocence of Sacco and Vanzetti. I mean, there are rallies in Berlin and Rome and Paris and London, just like there were for George Floyd or for bunches of other people. But they're taking someone here who is transparently guilty, and they want to convince the public that they're innocent. And then when that person is executed, then they have a real cause. So what happens is that Catherine Ann Porter, who would go on and win a Pulitzer Prize, was then a young liberal. The Useful Idiots, we know a lot of those personally. Do you have any favorites in that?
We'll name them later on.
on.
Yeah, I've dated a lot of Useful Idiots.
But Catherine Ann Porter was your classic Useful Idiot. And so she's outside the prison in Massachusetts picketing the pending execution of Sacco and Vanzetti. And then she stops and talks to her group leader, like this, radical little woman who's there, communist, leading this protest. And she pleads with the leader, and she says, "Is there any chance we could save them?" She goes, and the communist turns to her and says, "Save them? What possible good do they do us alive?" Right? That's the way it worked. So you exploit the seeming injustice of their execution, and then you foment rallies and protests and riots, major riots all over the major capitals of the Western world. And that's the way they rolled for 90 years. And you can probably think of other examples.
They use moral relativism and secular humanism, which is their 1-2 punch for everything.
For everything, sure.
And that's how they try to make erode the stability of all these decisions that are made, like how the guilt it's all relative when you think about it. after they throw every different argument at it and headline,
Right,
they're just trying to fix the world and make it better
right
against imperfect people like you. And who are we to judge? Oh, that was somebody else who said that. Who am I?
There we are.
But we're in the moral relativism zone.
And right, and they'll
everything.
convince us that whatever cause they are for is the right cause.
That's right.
And no matter how perverse it may seem, based on traditional, Judeo-Christian standards, it's holier.
Because those aren't good.
That's right. Those are old-fashioned and racist and homophobic. But so after Sacco and Vanzetti, that was very successful for them. A great way to get emails and whatever else they had, and the equivalent of in 1927.
They would have had T-shirts with her frying on Old Sparky, like the ones with Che Guevara.
Oh yeah.
If they would have had T-shirts back then,
they should have.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they did, but I don't know if they called them T-shirts. And one of these, it was a Niccolo Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, or the other way. I forget their first. I know the two first names. I just can't put them with the last names. And I don't want to take a chance.
I always thought it was Johnny Sacco.
Johnny Sacco. That was the movie. They made it simpler.
Johnny attack giant robot.
And there was a dark side to all this too, and that is that Upton Sinclair. You familiar with him? Mm-hmm. We had to read his book when we were in high
I had
school.
to read, and then I got him confused with Sinclair Lewis, and I was like, how dare you people give me two books, force me to read them within 6 months? With authors, I'm going to confuse forever. For the rest of my life.
Every high school kid had that same grudge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole lot of names out there, right?
Right.
How can two of them be named
Sinclair?
Right. It's not. There were no kids on my block named Sinclair. I don't know about yours, but Bobby, Joe,
I
Jack,
did have
Jimmy,
one, actually.
Sinclair. No, there were no Sinclairs in my world. Anyhow, Upton Sinclair was the guy who wrote The Jungle, which is
about the meat processing.
Right. He was went undercover reporting when that was okay until Project Veritas made it un-okay. And he writes this novel, and he really wants, it's a socialist tract, and he's trying to organize socialists. Mm-hmm. But instead, he ends up creating the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, because of...
He just went full-on communist.
Right. He ends up, eventually running for governor of California, a socialist. But he writes a 2-volume story of the Sacco and Vanzetti case called Boston, right? He's halfway into the book and writing the book, and he gets a call from the lawyer, the original lawyer for Sacco and Vanzetti. And the guy talks to him and says, hey, listen, I got to tell you this. I know you've put a lot into this. These guys are guilty. They're guilty of sin. And so now Upton Sinclair is thrown into a moral quandary. Liberals used to be capable of moral quandaries back in the day.
Now they call them speed bumps.
That's right. It's like roadkill, And so he goes to his wife. She goes, what can I do? He convinced me that these guys are guilty.
Yeah.
She goes, just keep on writing, because if you don't, they'll kill us. By they, she meant the Comintern, the Soviet agents. And so he finishes a 2-volume book, Boston. And to this day, we're still lionizing Sacco and Vanzetti. Universities have statues to them. They teach courses around them. They honor their memorials and all that stuff. And so then they repeat this pattern. It's like, it's like rinse and repeat. It's the greatest advertising slogan of all time, right? And then shampoos, right? This, you were in advertising. You just double your sales, by telling people to shampoo twice, right?
That's not nearly as good as the Arm & Hammer one.
Which is what?
Where they tell you to throw that baking soda down your sink because it freshens it. Now, that's the best of all time.
That's not bad.
Buy this crap, throw it down your sink, and get some more.
That's better than just leaving it in the back of your refrigerator, which, of course...
It's another good one.
Yeah, but, how often do you need to replace that one?
It says on the package once a month.
Okay.
Believe it or not. The other day I thought, man, do they still fool people into sticking this in the corner of their fridge? And I looked, sure enough, and I said,
I got one.
did they have the guts to tell you to do a fresh one every month? That's crazy.
Well,
What are you putting in your refrigerator?
Right.
Some kind of Middle Eastern pickled cucumber salad?
I don't know. It's there, and I think it's something you don't even question. It's like something your mother told you to do, X amount of years ago, and you still do it.
Democrats are all doing it.
So anyhow, they're rinsing and repeating. The suck does anything work? They rally around Alger Hiss, communist spy, Soviet agent. They rally around the Rosenbergs.
They're making martyrs. They're manufacturing
right.
martyrs.
Soviet agents.
Phony martyrs.
And when they, it was J. Edgar Hoover who said, don't execute Ethel Rosenberg because you're going to make her a martyr. You're going to just drive this movement. And the hardcore on the left are saying, execute her, right? What good does she do us alive? They want her dead.
By the way, all you hardcore leftists out there, if you want to know who really cares about the gals, it's not your fellow hardcore leftists.
No, they do not, right?
They're equal rights when it comes to, sitting in old Sparky and flipping the switch.
Right. They're good for that. So anyhow, they do it to Rosenbergs. Then a whole line of, especially ethnic killers, Hurricane Carter, Mumia Abu Jamal, Leonard Peltier, all, Indians or blacks or whatever.
Leonard Peltier.
And then there's always like a Bob Dylan comes along, writes a song about them.
Peltier. Yeah, I know all the killer songs.
Yeah, Mumia Abu Jamal, and they end up getting shows on NPR and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And, Mumia was on the death row, and then, they took him off because the Pennsylvania authorities figured, why create another martyr? Now I'm going to tell you about the switch. The paradigm switch comes, I trace it to 2012. This is a case I know very well. So
we got a paradigm switch here.
Right. And we're going to switch now from taking the guilty and picturing them to the world as innocent.
Right.
And then you exploit the rage that comes when the guilty are convicted and or ideally executed.
Tried and true. Good trick.
Now, as evil as that was, it was relatively victim-free, right? You create a lot of psychological moral victims, you create a lot of long-term damage, but no one who is innocent gets hurt.
Well, it was more of a obfuscation than it was a retargeting.
That's right. Right. It was a larger themed adventure, expedition. You don't have a target. Right, exactly. It's the kind of thing that Saul Alinsky would have approved of and probably did. Then in 2012, and this is a case I know very well, so bear with me if I talk about it at too much length. Interject if you get bored, okay?
All right. I'm sorry I was dozing off. Go ahead.
Anyhow, in 2012, February 26, 2012, Trayvon Martin.
Know him well, yeah. You do.
Now, here's what I know about this case that many people on the left don't know, but he is 17 years old. He's more than 6 feet tall, angry. His family's collapsed around him at least 2 occasions. He's being rejected by this Haitian-American hottie he's been chasing. He's been suspended from school for the 3rd time that school year, and now he has to spend the time up with his father's girlfriend and 200 miles from Miami in Sanford, Florida. He's high, and he goes to the 7-Eleven that night to buy some blunts from these guys who are hanging out there.
And blunts, for those at home who aren't into the drug subculture, like somebody I know, are cheap, nasty, gnarly little cigars that very poor old men used to smoke and go to the Kansas City A's games.
Right.
And the end of them, they stuff illicit drugs into them.
That's right.
And then they smoke them. And the overwhelming odor of the nasty fake tobacco in those cigars kind of obscures that odor.
That's right.
And for some reason, that is more pleasurable than just rolling them up in a spleef and smoking it. But I don't know why.
But Trayvon's only 17, so he cannot legally buy a blunt,
Oh, man.
he could get it. He could castrate himself so he could become a girl, but he can't legally buy a blunt.
Can't get the Phillies blunts.
But he knows there's some guys that are older, and they hang out there, and this is all captured on the video cam, and him transacting with these guys. He also buys some famously iconic Skittles, and not iced tea, but watermelon cooler. The media couldn't even mention the word watermelon.
The media got off. The media said iced tea.
You wonder why, right?
Yeah.
You
can't say
the
watermelon.
word watermelon, right? I mean, that's how.
How do we know that didn't get this episode cut right off?
Well, we buried it 20 minutes in, so they
Let's
might
go
not.
back.
Right. I mean, literally, I said that we're 20 minutes and 5 seconds in.
Okay.
So, but those make up 2/3 of the ingredients of what was called purple lean, which was a kind of a ghetto drink to get totally high on. The third ingredient, you have the candy, you have the soda, the soft drink, and you have like Robitussin or any kind of codeine, and that's you make yourself for an evening, right? So he leaves his little quasi stepbrother back in the apartment. He walks a mile or whatever to the 7-Eleven. Now he's been suspended 3 times that school year. This is the little boy that were,
with the sweet picture.
Right.
It looked like the little guy, Gary, what's his name on Different Strokes or something? All cute with the Gary Coleman with the little cheeks. And, hi, I'm Gary. I'm cute little. And then in the next picture you see, hey, Mo.
Yeah, right. Don't go there. So he's walking back now. He's on the phone with his girlfriend, this Haitian American hottie that he's just totally enraptured by, and she's blowing him off. I mean, I've seen the text and stuff. I know what she's saying. Not necessarily on the phone, but on the text. They texted 100 times that day. And he's angry. 3 suspensions that school year. The one was for being in possession of burglary tools and stolen jewelry, right?
Big deal.
Now, you and I at 17, we get caught by the police. This is a literal police department for the Miami-Dade schools. We go to prison. We go to juvie, right? But they have this special program for minorities that they want to break up the school to jail pipeline, so they give them a pass. A few years later, they would give Nicholas Cruz the same pass on the same program, and he rewarded the liberal benefactors by killing 17 of his classmates in Parkland, Florida. So that's how the program worked. Trayvon Martin didn't do that much that bad.
No.
But he
gets an A.
Right, yeah, relatively speaking. He's casing out apartments, which is his thing. George Zimmerman, neighborhood watch captain, on the way to the store, hard-working guy.
Volunteer civil rights
right.
proponent of sorts.
Totally, yeah. And that's the thing that got buried totally is the year before, Zimmerman in Sanford, Florida, led a one-man crusade to get justice for a black homeless man who had been punched out by the son of a police lieutenant. He went to the churches, he handed out flyers, and he posted these flyers with the quote, the Edmund Burke quote, all it takes for evil to triumph is for a good man to do nothing. Right. But and that's all buried. Right, that will all be buried. That whole story will be buried.
When you're dealing with psychopaths, it's true. No good deed goes unpunished.
Well, it's interesting because that is, you have the Anglo-Irishman, Edmund Burke saying about, the justice, evil can triumph only when. And then you have an Anglo-Irish playwright, Oscar Wilde, saying no good deed goes unpunished. And those are the bookends of George Zimmerman's life.
That's right.
So he sees this guy skulking in the shadows, right? He does exactly what he's told to do. He calls the non-emergency hotline. And they said, we'll send the police right away. And they said, what's the address? He gets out of the car. First, he's trying to follow Martin, who runs away.
Right.
And then the cop says, are you following him? He says, yeah. He goes, you don't need to do that. So Zimmerman stops. He goes to look for an address where he can meet the cop because he doesn't know the address. He's inside this development, this gated community that collapsed with the 2008 Florida real estate thing, with one wall not built, so the gate is not particularly useful, and which is a quarter vacant and a quarter Section 8. This is the gated community that he's protecting.
No, that's United States of America.
Today, unfortunately.
With a broken border and 1/4 Section 8.
That's it. That's about it. And that was the paradigm that reflected the nation as a whole. And so he calls it in while he's walking back. Trayvon Martin's had 4 minutes to get back to the place where he was staying. Martin circles back, sucker punches Zimmerman, knocks him to the ground, straddles him MMA style, and starts wailing away. Martin is a half a foot taller than Zimmerman. He's an experienced MMA fighter, right? An aspiring MMA fighter. A neighborhood comes out and sees exactly what's happening. He says, hey, stop that, stop. And then Martin doesn't stop. He just keeps pummeling. So the neighbor goes back inside to call 911. He hears the shot. He comes back outside, and Martin is lying there dead. Zimmerman, after getting his head pounded into the concrete for 45 seconds, takes out his gun and has the wherewithal to shoot him, right? That's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens next,
Mm-hmm.
The media get a hold of this story.
Yep.
And and this is the first time they did this in real depth that I can recall, where they spent a year from the shooting, year and a half to the trial, portraying Zimmerman as an evil white supremacist who ruthlessly killed this little boy for no reason other than that he was just being black and walking home to bring his Skittles and iced tea to his little brother, right?
Yeah.
That's the story.
That's the story. And if any of you at home or any of you who are watching this believe that story, please do not vote ever again.
Right.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No. And
I mean, it's just that the truth has been out there for so long. You got to really want to believe this crap
and
to swallow it and to still be chewing on the cud at this point in 2023. Still be going, Trayvon.
But in the 10 years since, that's just one story out of many that our friends on the left have been asked to believe, and they've swallowed whole. And that will lead us to Trump in a minute. And just a little bit more on this one. I've gotten to know George and his family well.
Yep.
I wrote a book on a subject called If I Had a Son.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was out to lunch a few years ago with George and his parents, mother and father. And we were talking about the case. And George's mother is a Peruvian immigrant.
Right.
His great-grandfather is black.
Right.
And she she named him. She named him after her brother, Jorge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we're talking, and I said to George, if she had named you Jorge instead of George, I never would have heard of this case.
That's right.
Because in an election year, 2012, the last thing the media would want to tackle is a story involving a Trayvon and a Jorge, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's one of their...
And I saw Morning Joe grab a hold of that George handle.
Yeah.
The first morning that thing came across their transom, they were so excited.
They were.
They were just giddy, and they were talking. They had them a white supremacist named George, and they were just thrilled. And then I don't know whether it was that episode or the next day when they found out he pretty much looked like a regular old Hispanic guy.
He does. Yeah.
And that he was half Hispanic.
And his first language is Hispanic because his father was in the military when he was born, when he was raised by his mother and grandmother, his abuela. And his last name, though, is Zimmerman. His nice German name, George Zimmerman. How much more white supremacist can you get? And so that was the trigger. The name was the trigger. And once they jumped the gun, they couldn't pull it back in.
They couldn't pull it back.
So we just didn't see pictures of George,
they just made him somehow be white.
Right.
He's just white now.
And the case...
And that's enough.
Right.
That's bad enough. So we're good with that.
And the case is even worse. And I had my suspicions. I was writing the book in real time. My deadline was 6 weeks from the end of the trial. So when I attended the trial, in fact, I didn't stay for the whole thing, but I watched the whole thing on TV or in person. And then I was contacted by a Los Angeles filmmaker I know named Joel Gilbert. You may know him. And he wanted to pursue this case even more. I introduced him to George. And Joel is a relentless researcher. And he went in and he got all the text, all the tweets, the whole timeline. And what he discovered, and this is beyond doubt, is that the key witness to the case, the alleged girlfriend of Trayvon Martin, who's a good-looking 6-foot kid, you know, healthy, athletic, they presented in depositions and at the trial as this 300-pound mentally challenged Rachel Gentile. You remember this?
This is an unbelievable story.
Who couldn't read cursive, right? And that's what we know, and we felt sorry for her in a way. But what Gilbert found out is that the real girlfriend was the Haitian-American hottie that Trayvon was obsessed with. And when Benjamin Crump recruited her to perjure herself, to say that she was on the phone with Trayvon when Zimmerman attacked, she balked. She refused. She said it in an interview that he played on the air, but she wouldn't go to the deposition. She wouldn't go to trial. The state prosecutors come to the deposition, and instead of finding this cute 16-year-old, they find this massive 19-year-old, and they went with it. And they were Republicans. They were as scared of the mob as the Democrats, maybe even more scared. And then that's the story. That was the template. And they took that template to Ferguson. Then they took it to Minneapolis. They took it to every place they had to go. Find some innocent person, portray him as guilty, build a cause around it. And then in Zimmerman's case, when he's acquitted, that's when Black Lives Matter started, right after the acquittal. They exploited the outrage of these ignorant masses to form this movement. And they took it to Ferguson a year later. And it caused a massive spike in inner city crime once the police started backing off, saying, what's in it for us, right? I interviewed Darren Wilson, the Ferguson cop, spent a day with him. He was shaken. He was months later after the thing, and, you know, he lost a job. His wife was losing her job. He had a new baby at home. He lost his career. He couldn't be a cop anywhere. And I haven't heard from him since. He was thinking of doing a book then, but he went ghost, you know, just as Zimmerman's had to go ghost. Just disappear. And that is our model now. It was bad enough when they took the guilty and made them innocent. But when they take the innocent and made them guilty, that reached a new level of depravity that we have not seen from our friends on the left before. And then what happens when Trump is ascendant? They raise their sights. I said, hell, if we could take out George Zimmerman, we could take out Darren Wilson, we could take out these guys. Why not take out Mike Flynn? Why not take out Paul Manafort or George Papadopoulos or Carter Page? Or why not take out Donald Trump, right?
This is the classic case, and I talk about this a lot when you're dealing with the psychological issues that are behind the nihilistic leftists.
Right.
The psychopathy, the nihilism, they always overplay their hand. In the end, they cannot help it. This is the compelling. Right. This is our saving grace.
Right, and you're absolutely right.
Without that, who knows what would happen? But they always, because they don't have a sensitivity to humanity,
right,
and about what I'm going to put myself in the category of normal humans, just for the sake of this argument, but for what we perceive to be contra bonos mores. You crossed the line.
Right.
That's beyond the pale.
Right.
They don't get it. They don't feel, because they never feel that way. They don't understand it. This case with Trump, with General Flynn, if you take the time, and time will eventually allow everyone to do this, you can look at the case with context, details, and specifics in an objective way and go, oh my God, this was a genuine martyr.
Right. Yes. Right.
They have shot themselves in the foot by taking a guy who is not very sympathetic to even those who love him.
You're talking about Donald Trump, correct?
And they're somehow molding him into a human being that is sympathetic, and people are going to go, oh, my God. I don't know how bad Trump is, but look what these people just did to him that was so evil that it's worse than anything that he's ever done.
I mean, it was so evil that even Jeb Bush was protesting, right?
Yeah.
Now, and this is, and they did this in 2016. They miscalculated, right? They figured we could pump Trump up, and then they had Access Hollywood in a can probably a year, as soon as he declared. They knew that was their ace card. They were going to drop that. And you know that the wimps went running like the Paul Ryans of the world.
Oh, yeah.
But in this case, and this is why I think they went back and forth with it for so long, is because they're thinking, hey, this is going to pump Trump up. What if we pump him up too much? No, he's still going to be easier to beat than, say, DeSantis, because we're going to be running off the crappiest 4-year record in American history, right? We're going to be running on a record that makes Jimmy Carter look like friggin' Abraham Lincoln, It's so bad in so many ways. And in Trump's, I watched his talk, and he was after the indictment, and he nailed it. I mean, it was disciplined, it was structured. It was a litany of all the parade of horrors of the last 3 years, 2.5 years. Or, in his case, the 5 years that preceded that.
As I have predicted.
Yeah.
He will be tanned, not orange. He will have better hair.
Yeah.
He'll be 40 pounds lighter.
Yeah.
And he'll be measured in his speeches.
That's right.
And I hate to scare the hell out of everybody who's against Trump in this case, but when he does those things, he's going to be unbeatable.
Right, and that raises, that's so they'll have to do something. I mean, that's why we have these in a backlog of other cases they could bring against them, and this is their best case probably.
Well,
no one knows what it is.
This is the best case they got from Acme, Incorporated.
Yeah, right. The same box that the Wile E. Coyote.
Wile E. Coyote. Yeah, they've been, since Wile E. Coyote died, I think about 1973.
He died about 4,000 times, if I recall.
Yeah, they've been the biggest Acme customer, the Democrat Party. And they've been buying all this Trump anvils, and they got
explosives.
Yeah, rockets. Nothing's working.
Pianos. I mean,
nothing's working.
Yeah. Well, it's and it's amazing, really, that it's they could keep at it, but that is their model now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're well beyond. I mean, they can still pull out a guilty guy and make him look innocent. They did it with George Floyd, but and all those other clowns from the summer of 2020. I can't even remember their names anymore. Breonna Taylor or whatever. They're all. But and they don't even remember their names anymore.
No, and we don't get into the politics.
They're fungible.
We're talking about what's causing all this.
Right.
But if we actually got down into these rabbit holes and started talking about the gamesmanship and the brinksmanship and all this crazy, and the D's and the R's and the I's and all that stuff,
yeah,
it's so crazy. It's not even interesting. It's so nutty now.
Right. It's
and where are the parties?
Right.
The parties don't even exist anymore. It's all they've got such a mess of cloak and dagger and all kinds of crazy stuff. You don't know what side anybody's on, who's against whom.
Well, and that is the problem for the Democrats with the Trump indictment, and that is they've forced the wavering Republican types to at least pretend to care.
They have. I've noticed that. You hear people like Mitt Romney coming out saying this is a bad idea.
And Jeb Bush. I'm waiting for George W. to say something. You think about all the blood, sweat, and tears the Republicans put into his sort of quasi-misbegotten 8 years. You think a little gratitude would come down the line, but I haven't seen that.
Boy, that was a bad investment, wasn't it?
But yes and no, because it would, otherwise we have friggin' what's his name?
Right.
Al Gore. We'd have windmills in our own backyard now. It'd be really bad.
I think a lot of this, Jack, is this pseudo-religious kind of process that they put everybody, and this is a humiliation ritual.
Yeah.
Something I've noticed they use a lot lately. Humiliation rituals. And when you see something, you go, well, that makes no sense at all. In fact, it's really unfair to a certain part of the populace, and it's really mean.
Yeah.
And I don't get it. Or something that one of the regulatory agencies will suddenly push onto the poor farmers or something, and you go, well, wait a minute. That doesn't have anything to do with better farming or anything. These are humiliation rituals.
Well, and that goes, the religious analogy is right on. I mean, I wrote a book in 2015 called Scarlet Letters. And the classic Hawthorne tale, the letter was an A for adultery. Hester Prynne, the protagonist of the book, a very sophisticated book in a lot of ways, was in fact guilty of adultery. And she was made to stand in the Boston Town Square with the letter A, and she had to wear that letter for the rest of her life. Today we have a whole alphabet of letters. The most potent is the Scarlet R for racism, Scarlet.
I remember this book.
I mean, the Scarlet I for
really
Islamophobia, H for homophobia.
Yep.
T for transphobia. Now we didn't even have that. That wasn't even in my
No,
litany of things 8 years ago.
They hadn't figured that one out yet.
I didn't even have that. I had to revise. I had to put up a new, updated version of the book because the transphobes have taken over the whole world. And what was curious about it is that the origin of the phobe part, which means fear, it's Greek for fear.
Yeah.
Well, the original term homophobia was coined by a psychologist who believed that the homophobe was the man who was afraid of his own potential homosexuality.
That old thing that whoever's
right
speaking the loudest,
and then
who smelt it dealt it, basically.
That's right. Then they externalized it,
yeah.
and they expanded its use so that anyone who had any questions about the homosexual agenda was now a homophobe. And I've known gays all my life. I've never been afraid of a gay, except for that guy who picked me up in the desert and threatened to kill me when I was hitchhiking in Arizona. But that's another story.
You're kind of asking for that
yeah,
one. But go ahead.
I kind of was, I guess. But I scared him off. He ended up taking me to my door, unharmed. But then here's the clever guys. This one guy testified before Congress about this. He had been a radical Muslim, reformed after September 11th. He lost faith in the movement. And he talked about the origin of the phrase Islamophobia. He said, he belonged to this group, and they said, boy, the gays are having such success with homophobia. Let's make the word Islamophobia and throw that out there. And it succeeded, right? They also started using the phrase Muslim American to mimic blacks who were getting away with African American, But the gist of my book, Scarlet Letters, was that, and the phrase I used, this is before the word woke was in current parlance, I used the phrase neo-Puritans because they were doing exactly what you're talking about. That is, they were finding someone to put on that pedestal, not the pedestal, the stand in the middle of town, and shame, right? Shame was their weapon. And it was an old, there were, Protestant divines condemning infant damnation. They're not preaching infant damnation, were not as vengeful and as unforgiving as this religious cult of the Neo-Puritans. There's no redemption. There's only shame. There's only guilt. There's no way to purge yourself of your past. The least tweet from 20 years ago hangs over your head as like a Damascene sword. So is that a word? I don't know.
Damoclean?
I don't know. The sword of what?
Damoclean?
Right, that's the word I'm looking for. I just made up the adjectival form.
Which is great.
I don't know. It may work.
I need that word. Let me make a note of that.
What is it? Sword of what? Is it Damocles?
Damocles?
Or is it Damocles?
Isn't that it?
I think so. So it'd be Damoclesian sword.
Damoclesian?
Yeah. So
Sounds
anyhow,
better than Damoclean.
as we look down the road, yeah,
Damn sword.
a double-edged sword with a blade on either side. So, and that brings us back to where these people are now. They're the people who are leading this brigade now, like the Chuck Schumers of the world, or the Merrick Garlands, or even the Barack Obamas, are the Robespierres of this movement.
Yeah, they're going to get it.
There's a double-edged sword. No, a single blade. It's a single-edged sword. Then
Yeah.
guillotine only needed one edge.
It goes both ways.
And it does. And the liberals are the first ones on the chopping block, right? Maybe the libertines get it before them, but it doesn't go much further. So you create a monster, as Dr. Frankenstein found out.
Well, there's a monster among us for sure.
And the monster comes back to get you. Hey, you've been listening to, what have you been listening to?
Upstream with Cashill and Edge.
Produced by the great people at
Real Media Audio.
And Overland Park. And video.
Video, yeah.
Great production facility here in Overland
Got a
Park.
full deal, got the whole sound stage and everything here.
Great. And we'll be back next week, presuming that the gods of the internet allow us.
Not the gods, the demons.
Demons, right. We are subject to their will.
Yes, we are.
Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.